Hello guys and gals, me Mutahar. I'm going to ask you all, I'm going to start this video off with a little question. Would you be okay if for 24 hours a day, some person that you didn't know was staying in your house watching every single thing that you did? Every time you slept, they'd be in the corner watching you. When you're in the bathroom taking a fat dumpy, they're watching you. When you're playing some Elden Ring, they're watching you. Are you okay with somebody watching you for 24 hours a day? Do you leave your door unlocked and just open when you come home? Hey, come on in, buddy. It don't matter. Or do you like having privacy? Do you like having a little bit of freedom? Okay, you know, ladies and gentlemen, I like my privacy. Okay, I like having a little corner of the earth to myself. But it seems like the government doesn't really agree with me on that one. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is something that is very important to me, and it's something that I want you to consider important to yourself. I'm one of those people where I feel like nowadays, you know, people look at me as a paranoid nut job. Like, why do you have to have like 7 or 8 virtual machines? Why do you care about, you know, encryption? Why do you use Linux instead of Windows? Well, because I like to have control, and I like to control the privacy, and I like to monitor what's actually happening on the technology that I have. Because if it's the last bastion of freedom, it's the technologies that we have that basically allow us to communicate with the people around us, store our data, and store a record of our lives well past the point of our deaths, okay? So to understand, the Earn It Act is actually showing up again. For those of you who don't know what the Earn It Act is, it actually stands, from what I understand, to be the Eliminating Abusive and Rampant Neglect of Interactive Technologies Act of 2022. So to understand, this bill is kind of framed, I guess, to the general public as trying to stop, you know, child exploitation on the internet. Now, I've made a lot of content on this channel alone where I've talked about stopping child exploitation. It's bad, it's wrong, and I think most people on YouTube agree with that. I think 99.9% of the civilized world agree with that. The ones that don't probably should be put on a goddamn watch list. But I understand that, you know, there's stopping child exploitation, you know, that's rampant in technologies. I mean, there's always those Discord jokes where, you know, there's some shady moderator going on, or there's some crazy online game where something shady is actually going on and kids are being targeted. That exists, and that's a reality, and that's technology that must be stopped. And there are agents, there are federal agents, there are international agents who sit down and spend hours of their life trying to stop that stuff. But if it's a saying that I've known growing up is throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Imagine, okay, just to stop this sick activity, you are throwing away encryption technologies. You are throwing away frameworks of the internet that allow everyone in the world to have privacy, to have reasonable security. Does that seem normal to you? Does it seem normal to throw out every point of security just to stop bad people? Again, the crux of this is because of encryption technologies, you know, allowing basically our smartphones and devices to encrypt this stuff, encrypt all of our data. If somebody committing bad activities is captured, in order to find more evidence against them, utilizing their captured smartphones or hard drives and then decrypting them through an actual law enforcement backdoor. Unfortunately, security does not work that way. You can't have it all. It's literally all or nothing. If you basically allow a backdoor to be used by the FBI or any police agency, you are basically creating a backdoor that anybody could abuse. But we'll get to that in a bit. This is just something that is, this is something with far more ulterior motives than I want to get into. So let's cover this. This is actually the Earn It Act, for those of you who wanted to look into. Now, it's a big, long page that's introduced, okay? And it has a lot to do with Section 230. For those of you who don't know what Section 230 is, Section 230 is a, you know, act that allows us on the internet to actually upload content to Facebook, to YouTube, to Twitch, to whatever online service, and it's basically, in short terms, a rule, a set of guidelines, a set of laws that allow a lot of these platforms like YouTube to host content and basically not have the, I guess, liability on them, right? So if somebody uploads bad content to YouTube, YouTube doesn't get the lawsuit. YouTube doesn't get taken down by the government as long as YouTube complies with removing that. YouTube is just simply a place where people upload user-generated content to, and the same could be said for any other website. Now in 7A, you can see, notwithstanding paragraph 6, none of the following actions or circumstances shall serve as an independent basis of liability of a provider of an interactive computer service for a claim or charge described in the paragraph if 857A1, the provider utilizes full end-to-end encryption messaging services, device encryption, or other encryption services. Now, for those of you who are using modern-day smartphones like an iOS device or an Android device, you're actually subject to encryption by default most of the time. If you're on an iPhone device, it is pre-encrypted the moment you buy into it. If you have an Android device, a high-end one as far as I know, you'll typically have encryption baked into the device. In fact, most modern-day operating systems allow you to encrypt basically at installation. Encryption is a part of our lives. A lot of the messaging services you use, like iMessage or WhatsApp or Signal, or really anything, all have a basis of allowing end-to-end encryption. So the way end-to-end encryption works is two devices that communicate with each other, okay, basically devise a set of key pairs, okay? So one person has key A, one person has key B. These people both contain the key pairs required to decrypt each other's communication. No one else has these key pairs but those two devices, meaning that let's say you're on WhatsApp, right? If end-to-end encryption is working the way that it should, WhatsApp will only see a encrypted, set of packets going onto their servers. They can't just grab those packets and then decrypt it themselves. Unless Facebook has access, Facebook being the owners of WhatsApp, has access to both those devices and the key pairs that are all encrypted on those devices as well, then they can take that, message, they can take the correspondence and decrypt it themselves. End-to-end basically allows these people to give you a sense of security, all without nobody spying on you theoretically, and even the actual, provider of the service themselves. Same thing with applications and data. For instance, when I cover, things like the deep web, or when I'm actually testing viruses, I create a separate partition on my computer using VeraCrypt. This is a encrypted partition on my drive, meaning that let's say somebody was to grab this, okay? They couldn't break into it. I actually use VeraCrypt to store financial documents. So when I have to pay taxes, obviously I have all of my financial documents, everything, even my health-related documents on my computer. The only people that ever applies to is a medical team, me, and the Canadian and American tax department. Until then, I encrypt it so no other third party can get into my computer and steal that data from me. If somebody steals my phone, because of encryption technologies, they won't be able to break into them. The same encryption technologies that power the United States military is the same encryption technologies that exist on your everyday devices for the most part. This is why security is given. This is why you hear those cases of the FBI putting pressure onto like Apple, onto various tech companies to allow them to have a backdoor. Because of end-to-end encryption, there's a lot of cases where these big tech companies can't even give them that. You can't have a backdoor if it never existed in the first place, okay? That's what end-to-end encryption allows us to do. If that is threatened, you can understand the security of the internet and its frameworks in the future are also threatened as well. The provider, number two, does not possess the information necessary to decrypt a communication. Again, they're referencing a backdoor. Like I talked earlier about key pairs, if you don't have the technology to decrypt a piece of correspondence or data, well then, that's where you fall under. Number three, the provider fails to take an action that would otherwise undermine the ability of the provider to offer full end-to-end encryption messaging services, device encryption, or other encryption services. So basically, you're not purposefully undermining your end-to-end encryption from what I can understand of that legalese. Now, I think it's really fucked up to frame, child exploitation, because let's understand, let's just make one thing very clear. Obviously, child abuse materials and, the safety of children online absolutely 1000% matters. But it's fucked up when politicians and law enforcement agencies have all of a sudden decided that, hey, in order to pass this incredibly draconian security fucking bill through the government, maybe if you attach this very emotionally charged subject of child exploitation to it, it'll probably smooth through pretty easy. Anytime any governmental agency or law enforcement agency says, think of the children, and they pass stuff like this, there is always an exterior motive beyond it. Now, the EFF, which is the Electronic Frontier Foundation, very, very, very well known, have actually pushed their own analysis onto the situation. They've talked about it being an attack on speech because it undermines Section 230. They've talked about it basically attacking on security, which is where I'm mostly focused on. Because as somebody that has been in this, I know the implications that such a law would actually impose on security as a whole. So here they're providing links, and I guess I'll just paraphrase it as much as I can. U.S. attorney generals and, well, U.S. federal agencies have always said, hey, it's cool to have encryption, but can we have a backdoor? So if we wanted to do some, law enforcement work, we'd have the option. Let me explain the real dangers there. Let's say you had a perfect encryption technology, and the FBI had the backdoor to come in, check whatever they wanted, and call it a day. Here's why that fundamentally, on a technical level, does not work. Once a backdoor is made, sure, the FBI could use it. What about other state agencies from other parts of the world? You think they don't have the resources to exploit a backdoor that's engineered into a safety mechanism? Okay, forget about that. What about criminal organizations that actually have people talented enough to break through those backdoors? By implementing a backdoor to save the children and let the FBI investigate, sure, maybe they might have completely altruistic, nice reasons. But criminals don't. Criminals would look at that and think, wow, a backdoor to possibly gain information to blackmail people, to exploit their finances, to ruin their lives. That's what you're getting into. The moment you start introducing security backdoors, okay, officially, is the moment you have completely killed your entire security mechanism for the system. That is not sensical. That's not smart, okay? You cannot have your cake and eat it too when it comes to end-to-end encryption, okay? Giving the FBI a backdoor means you give potentially everybody, bad or good, a complete backdoor into your communications, into your lives, into your systems. If you need any more evidence that Earn It is a thinly veiled attack on your rights to secure and private communications, take note of one of the more subtle changes it would bring to the law. Under Earn It, a plaintiff would no longer be required to prove that a defendant actually knew about sexual exploitation in order to win a lawsuit against them. The plaintiff would only be required to prove the defendant acted recklessly. Lowering the standard opens the door wide to lawsuits based simply on providing secure end-to-end encryption channels, a practice the Attorney General has characterized as irresponsible, which could be used to argue that encryption providers are acting recklessly. Earn It would have no effect, positive or negative, on the DOJ's ability to prosecute online platforms that criminally aid and abet abuse. Remember, Section 230 does not exempt online intermediaries from violations of federal criminal law. Yes, that's true. Because of Section 230, if people are out there promoting actual violence, promoting actual abuse, committing actual federal crimes, it does not exempt the intermediary organizations like YouTube and Facebook and, well, Google or anybody to be exempt from that. They still have to enforce and assist law enforcement. What's more, if an internet company discovers that people are using its platform to distribute exploitation material, current federal law requires it to provide that information to the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children, so NEMIC, and cooperate with law enforcement agencies, which is already being done. There are so many technologies that exist using machine learning tools from Microsoft and Google that allow this to happen. What's going on is basically an unnecessary law that provides more assistance to law enforcement agencies and governmental police states in order to surveillance on actual users. And if you think that, hey, we're making a big mountain out of a molehill, imagine people that rely on these technologies because their lives are dependent on it. People that are actually journalists operating in very, very dangerous areas, maybe somewhere in the Middle East or Asia or even in the United States or even in Europe, places where their coverage could potentially put their lives at risk. These people are doing God's work and taking away their security, taking away their privacy, taking away their encryption could potentially put their lives and the truth at risk. And that's not okay. All right, that's not fine. And if you as a person live in the year 2022 and you want to have just a bit of privacy that I believe you are given your God-given right to, then you got to stand up and go against this, because this is actually some of the worst shit that I've actually read. This is some of the most insane shit that I've actually read. And this act proves completely unnecessary. I don't even think big tech companies like Google or anybody are actually on board. This is simply an overreach from a governmental agency onto the average lives of people underneath it. Oppose this, be against it, and if anything, this should actually tell you that maybe you should start switching to technologies that are open source, not tied under threats of lawsuits and control by one federal agency. Technologies like Linux, technologies that are open source, technologies that anybody can modify and constantly audit. That said, though, I'm off my soapbox. I wanted to raise awareness about it because it's a big deal, at least to me, and it should be to you. This is me, Mudahar, and if you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike it if you dislike it. I am out. But wait, before I'm out, I just wanted to reiterate something. I know a lot of people are probably going to be like, I'm not from the United States, this doesn't affect me. And while in some cases, and depending on how regulations and laws work for certain countries, this isn't necessarily a confirmation or anything. It's not, your freedoms from this isn't confirmed. Remember, a lot of big tech companies that we rely on are based in the United States. A lot of our hardware is based from the United States. And so a lot of server space is hosted in the United States. By having a backdoor included in that section of server space does, at least as far as my understanding and knowledge goes, and again, I could be wrong in certain cases regarding this, I could be wrong depending on how emergent and how developed certain technologies are, does put a lot of people, even from outside the United States, or people who have no relation to that country, could be put at risk simply because they're using server space or technology or, services from the US in general. If that makes any sense. But hey, that is me off my soapbox. Yeah, now I'm actually out. Take care.